Hi everybody, so my math lesson, students will be comparing decimals to determine whether one is greater than, less than, or equal to one another. They already understand how to do whole numbers, which are greater than, less than, or equal to, so now we're just adding in decimals. So to start off the lesson, just to kind of get an understanding of where the students are, I would put on the board these two numbers, 1.23 and 2.3. Now for the video's purpose, it's actually going to look backwards. So like for me, this is a less than sign, but I know it looks like a greater than for you. And for me, this is a greater than sign, but it looks like less than for you. Just so in case you're wondering, like, wow, that doesn't make sense, that's why. So I would ask the students to show me with their fingers if they thought 1.23 is greater than, lesser than, or equal to 2.3. So student, can you please answer? That is correct. That answer. So 1.23 is less than 2.3. So then, if obviously some students wouldn't know that answer in my classroom, so then I would write down the numbers for another example. And for this example, I will be using 4.5 and 1.223. I would ask them if anybody could show me with their fingers what they thought their answer was. So can anybody tell me what the answer was? She's pretending she doesn't know the answer. So that's when I would introduce the place values chart. Because some students might think that because there's more numbers in 1.223, that means it's bigger. But in reality, the 4.5 is the bigger. So I'm going to hand the student a place value chart, and I'm going to ask her to write down those two numbers on the place value chart, and I wrote down one on the board, and so I would have written this in the classroom on the board. And while she's writing hers down, I will write down mine. I'll switch up colors. Okay, can everybody show their work to the teacher in the front of the class? Raise it up. Raise it up. Okay, so yes, that is correct. Now, can you tell me which one is bigger?
4.5 is bigger because it starts with 4.
And do we go based on the hundredths, tenths, and thousandths place, or do we go based on the ones and tenths place?
The ones and tens place.
Correct, because we're looking at the whole number first. So, like she showed you, she's able to realize that by going off whole numbers, the 4 in the ones place is bigger than the 1. Therefore, 4.5 is greater than 1.223. So in the classroom, I would be going over quite a few of these examples, and then once I have done that, to show greater than or less than, I would then show this example. Is 5.9 greater than or equal to 5.9000? So again, some students might get confused because they see more numbers in 5.9000, but they should have an understanding from the multiplication and division lessons that whenever they have just 5.9, they can imagine that there are zeros behind it. So in this case, they can write it on their place value chart. And on their place value chart, they would be able to tell that 5.9 is the same as 5.9, and they can either cover the zeros or write in zeros behind the other 5.9. So this is actually equal. So after those examples, then I would break the students into teams of 2, and they would just pick the person that they're sitting next to, and they're going to be playing a game of decimal war. So it's basically just any war game where I printed out cards, and what happens is you have the cards facing down, and since it's just me and my sister, I'm going to be another student for her. And or if you have children struggling, you can pull them aside and do it with just them as well, for extra help. But what you do is you both flip a card over and you determine whose card is bigger depending on the decimal. So I got 10.02 and she got 9.8. So who has the bigger number? I do. My 10.02 decimal is bigger than 9.8. Another example, flip a card. I received 9.15 and she received 90.01. So this is where the place value chart comes in handy. If they're struggling to understand why one is bigger than the other, they can take their place value chart and write down 9.15, and Rebecca received 90.01. And here they will be able to clearly tell that the 90 is the bigger number over 9. The 0 can be very tricky to students, so that's why the place value chart would be coming in handy during this lesson. So in this case, Rebecca won that round. One more example. I flipped over 14.1 and she flipped over 0.10. So again, place value chart, because 0 is the whole number, that might confuse them as well. So the place value chart, they will be able to determine that 14.1 is indeed greater than 0.10. So in my classroom, that would go on for about like 15 minutes, and also to make it a little bit more of an interesting game, if the students are able to grasp it, I will then ask the students to switch up partners. That way everyone's engaging with different students, which creates cooperative learning in the classroom. So after they finished playing that game, I will then hand out the delicious decimals worksheet for students to complete independently. And this is what it looks like. So it is 11 questions where they need to answer. They need to answer if the decimal is greater than, equal than, or lesser than. And they will be, after they complete it, they will be sharing their answers and comparing their answers with their neighbors. That way, the students are helping students, and I would be walking around the classroom, observing how they work and which students seem to need more help versus which students are doing very well, I should say. And so part of this worksheet, the bottom is a little bit of a challenge because this would be what the next lesson is going into. So of course Rebecca was able to answer it, but not every student in my 5th grade class would be able to answer the bottom. The top, they should definitely be able to answer, in which she did, but just to give you an example of the bottom, they're now rounding each decimal to the given place, so that's why it would be a little challenging. So both in the top and the bottom, the worksheet provides an example. So the example provided was 782.164 to the nearest tenth is 782.2. because 6 is the greater than 5, so you would round the 1 to a 2. So again, this would be a challenge for the students because they might not necessarily, they know how to round, but they might not know how to round decimals correctly. So that's why the bottom part is a challenge, and also information to help me plan for the next lesson. Before the students leave, I would be giving them a summative assessment, which is their exit ticket. It's just 3 short questions that they need to answer before we end the lesson. And again, it's just they are choosing which sign to put for the answer. And this should take only about less than 5 minutes. So if I see students struggling greater than 5 minutes, I know that those students need extra help. And as well as when I go back and grade all of these, I can determine if all 3 answers are correct, then they have mastered the lesson. 2 to 3, they're about average, and then below 2 answers correct, that means those students need extra help. And extension activity I planned is there is a cool activity on the computer where it can be interactive, or the students can just go to the computer or iPads themselves and play the game. But basically they're just, again, choosing between decimals if they're greater than, equal than, or lesser than. But that would be, again, my extension activity, or also I could send that information home for the students to gain some extra practice. So yeah, that